Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and on this episode we're doing Who Was Better. The topic of this Who Was Better? Two brother-in-laws, two former tag partners, IRS Mike Rotunda, or Mike Rotundo, depending on where he wrestled, versus Barry Windham. And like I said, these guys are brothers-in-law. These guys are good friends. They were the U.S. Express, a fantastic tag team. So let's put them up against each other, see who was better. Now, how we're going to grade this, we have 8 different categories. Each category we have to 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. At the end, we'll tally up their total points. Whoever has the most points wins. There is a chance for bonus points. We'll talk about it when we get there. Let's jump right in. Technical ability. For technical wrestling ability, I'm going to give both of these guys a 5. And when you're watching this, I want you to understand, I do grade it as a curve. You are graded against your timeline. I think you would be hard-pressed to find two wrestlers in the era of the 80s, which is mostly when they were at their best, or even early 90s, that were better in-ring talents than Rotundo and Windham. I'm just going to call them IRS because I keep going back and forth between Rotunda and Rotundo. IRS and Barry Windham are two of the most capable wrestlers. They could have had matches with anybody, be it Hulk Hogan, be it Ric Flair, be it Sting, be it the Steiner brothers, Sheik and Volkov. They just were great wrestlers and they could adapt their style to anybody. That's why they both get a 5 here. Now our next category, striking. For striking, I'm giving IRS a 3. I don't think he was necessarily bad, but for most of his career, he was portrayed as an amateur wrestler, so he did what he was supposed to do. He didn't have much of a striking attack. That's why he's right about middle of the road. Now for Windham, I'm giving him a 5. Windham did have more of a striking attack. He was more of a rough and rugged cowboy. And if you know anything about the rough and rugged cowboy characters, they like to punch and kick and clothesline you. Again, he was absolutely amazing in the ring. This was another thing that he really stood out. Next up, how they perform as a heel. Both of these guys are getting a 4. For me, the reason that they don't quite get a 5 is I think both of them made a perfect second in command for a faction and not a perfect leader of a faction. And what I mean by that is when you put Windham in the Four Horsemen, he's behind Flair. When you have IRS with DiBiase, he's behind Ted. When you have IRS in the Varsity Club, he's behind Sullivan. I think they were good heels. I just don't think that they were top-notch heels. Now, going from that, how they perform as a babyface. Again, I'm going to give these guys a 4. And I know Windham had a little bit more success in the higher upper card than Rotundo did, but I don't think you could ever say that either one of them was a focal point of a company or someone that sold pay-per-views. Now, Windham, part of his reason and part of the reason why he wasn't a multi-time world champion is because he didn't stay in one place long enough to be considered their top guy. He'd only be in a company for a couple months a year or so. So while I think they're both really good at being baby faces, I wouldn't put them on the level of Dusty Rhodes or Hulk Hogan or Randy Savage or whoever was comparable at the time. They're just a notch below that. Next up, promos. For promos, I'm giving IRS a 4, especially in the IRS character. If we were talking about that character alone, I think I would have gave him a 5. Now, he did stumble a bit as the Varsity Club guy. He did stumble a bit on his own. Therefore, he gets knocked down a little bit. For Barry Windham, Barry's getting a 3. I don't think Barry was ever considered a great talker. I can't tell you any time during any of his runs, even when he came back as a stalker or the Widowmaker, where I would say Barry was a top-level guy, a top-level talker, that is. I don't think he was bad, but I would say he's right about average. For presentation IRS is getting a 5. To me, the Varsity Club run, the IRS run, and even the U.S. Express run, I think he was portrayed exactly as his character should be portrayed. He was different. He was unique. I loved what he did. That's why he gets a 5. Now for Barry's getting a 4. And here's the reasoning. What about Barry's character is different than, say, Blackjack Mulligan, his father, or Outlaw Ron Bass, or later on JBL as Justin Hawk Bradshaw, or so on and so on and so on, the long line of cowboy characters. I still think he had great presentation, especially when he had the glove and was doing the claw. However, I can't give him that 5 because he's just another cowboy with chaps and a hat on. Our next category, Charisma. For charisma, I'm giving IRS a 3. I don't think it came as naturally to Mike as it did to Barry. I think Rotunda had struggled at times, especially when he was not IRS. He was a little bit more charismatic as IRS. However, the IRS character lent itself to him being dry, being monotone, being kind of robotic. So for that, I'm giving him it. For Barry Windham, Windham gets a 5. And to me, it's the connection. Barry Windham didn't need to be a good talker. He just had that connection with the crowd. He would come out, and whether he was a heel, you hated him. Whether he was a face, you loved him. His charisma was always top notch. For that, he gets a 5. Now, last but not least, big game performance. How they perform in the biggest stages, main event matches, championship matches, so on and so forth. For IRS, he's getting a 4. For me, I don't think he ever got the opportunity to be a top level singles wrestler. I would say as part of the Team Money Incorporated and the US Express, he was afforded the opportunity to be a top level tag wrestler. So I don't think you could really count him as having that many really big time matches. With that being said, when he did do very well. I gotta give him a 4 though, just because there's not a big sample size. Now for Barry Windham, he did have a larger sample size. Whether it be in Florida, whether it be in Crockett, even somewhat in the WWF at the time, he was in main event pictures. So for that, he gets a 5. It's often talked about that Ric Flair and Barry Windham is one of the great matches of all time. And there's a couple of them. I think the one that most people talk about is the Battle for the Belts or Champions Parade, something like that in Florida Championship Wrestling. I think Windham obviously was a top-notch guy, top-notch wrestler. When he was put on the biggest stage, he absolutely excelled. That's why he gets a 5. Now we're going to total them up. For IRS gets the 32. For Barry Windham, he gets 35. But wait, there is that bonus we talked about in the beginning. Every Wednesday, I put on my posts page here on Facebook a poll basically asking you guys, who do you think is better? And whoever you think is better out of the two, they get 5 bonus points. With that being said, the winner by a landslide was Barry Windham. He gets a 5 bonus points, bringing him up to 40. I didn't think that it was going to be anything different, but, you know, these guys are both amazing wrestlers. I love both of these guys. These guys were 2 wrestlers I cheered very early in my fandom. As the US Express, I followed their careers. Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda were 2 guys I absolutely loved to watch wrestling. Windham does deserve this, I believe. He is just a notch better, in my opinion. I came into this thinking he was. But yeah, so I agree with the results. Obviously, I made them. But let me know what you think. Do you think maybe IRS was better? Hit me up down here in the comments. Congratulations, Barry Windham. You won this round. Stay tuned for that post on Wednesday for next week's Who Was Better video. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching Who Was Better.